As always, please retry this question before watching the video. So for this question, I recommend actually most of you just skip it. You don't need to learn the nuances to be able to get this question correct. I'm going to give you a very simple explanation for why this is wrong. For those of you that want to go a little deeper, I will give you a deeper explanation. However, please know it is okay to not learn the nuances of this question because it will confuse you more than help you for most of you, especially with how little these exceptions show up on the English section of the ACT. All right, with that in mind, we'll go ahead and just jump in and I'll give you the simple reasons why each of these wrong answers are wrong. G is wrong because you have two independent clauses separated by a comma, and therefore the clauses are separated improperly. H is wrong for the same reason. The clause here, color film for cameras, that's a subject-verb combo. Color is not a dependent clause marker. Still is offset, is a conjunctive adverb. It's offset with a comma. It does not start the clause. The clause will start after the comma with the color, and therefore we have the same issue as in answer G, clause separated improperly, which is the same issue with answer J. So all three of those, we can go ahead and eliminate them because of clauses separated improperly. So if that makes sense to you, you can go ahead and go on to the next question. I'm going to go a little bit deeper here and explain why some of the exceptions or what some of the exceptions are that might have caused some of you to miss this question. But for the rest of you, probably good to just continue to the next question at this point. So some of you might have crossed off answer F because we have though, which though is sometimes a conjunctive adverb. But there is an exception to that. Though can also sometimes operate as a subordinate conjunction, okay? And so if you see though and it doesn't have a comma around it, it's probably okay. It is probably okay, all right? And so if you want to know how to determine, we can talk about how to determine if it's acting as a conjunctive adverb and needs to come after it, or it's acting as a subordinate conjunction. If it's acting as a conjunctive adverb, then it's contrasting it between the clause that comes before the though and the one that comes after. However, if though does not, if it's acting as a subordinate conjunction, it is contrasting the clause that it is in with the clause that follows, okay, which would make it a subordinate conjunction, and it's not going to have a comma in that scenario. All right, if that's over your head, don't worry about it. Just skip this one and go to the next. Another confusing thing that many of you might have missed this one for is comma for. All right, for is one of our fanboys. However, for can act as a preposition instead of a coordinating conjunction / fanboys, as it is in this scenario. We know that because if it starts a prepositional phrase for decades after, in this case, then it is acting as a preposition. If you're unsure if it's acting as a preposition, you can just replace it with the word because. If it works, it's a conjunction, okay? And therefore you can use it as a comma fanboys. If you cannot replace it with the word because, then it is acting as a preposition, and it is therefore not acting as a coordinating conjunction / fanboys, okay? If that's over your head, like I said, go ahead and skip it. Another complexity of this one is that most photographers continued is the clause here. And it has this introductory phrase for decades afterwards in front of it, but the introductory phrase is not offset with a comma. And therefore, some of you might think that this starts with a preposition, which is therefore a dependent clause. However, you don't have to separate out an introductory phrase if it is short, okay? And so the introductory phrase is an introductory phrase, and it is not a part of the clause here, and therefore the clause starts at most photographers continued. That's the subject-verb combo, and that is what makes this an independent clause. You could probably recognize, even if you didn't know any of those rules, you could probably recognize that this clause could stand alone as a sentence. And like I said, that's what we're trying to train you against. So I don't want you switching from that, because Learning how to just look at the first word to determine if it's an independent or looking at if it's a dependent clause marker is way easier for 95% of these questions. And doing this very, very complex stuff is just going to confuse you more than help you for most of it. So if this is confusing, which I am almost certain it is, just skip this. Don't add it to your worksheet. Just go to the next question. It's probably not going to hurt you more than it'll help you, and you'll be thankful you did. If this is the final Clause 3 question that you missed on this test, please go ahead and do the Clause 3 mastery until you get 10 questions correct in a row before you continue to the next category that you missed the most of.